All right, welcome back to our show. Do this every month. We take a look at games that chess.com users have submitted. And I'm going to give my same spiel. I do it every time. And that is the basic idea of the show is that reviewing your games is, although a painful process, the best way to improve. And me doing the show is just an extra layer where you, after you've gone over your games, to get some feedback that you might not be able to get from, say, the computer or something, just my own eyes and just thoughts rebounding off whatever I see going on in the game. Chess is a brutal game. I always want to say that. I just had my worst event in forever. It's a 9-round tournament, and after I got my GM title, I have not played that many 9-round tournaments, and a lot of it is just the exhaustion that sets in after so many rounds, and I had too many long games. Anyways, part of the, let's call it the complement to this show, is every Wednesday that's not the final Wednesday of the month, I do like just an hour-long show where I usually talk about one of my games. And the idea there is for me to force myself to do it, and also for you to get a sense of how I'm just going over my own games as well. And also so I don't feel like a hypocrite. So I'm not just looking at your games, but I'm also doing mine. So it's a very painful process. And I think when you play well and you have a great game, it's easier, you feel a buoyancy and you feel light and you feel like you're going to crush everybody. I felt that way just a month ago when I won the Denver Open. And now, of course, I feel terrible. And forcing myself now to go over these terrible losses is really part of the process of improvement. At least that's the theory that I'm putting out there. And, what we're doing here is we're doing a modern version of the Botvinnik idea of publishing your analysis, forcing yourself to coherently express what's going on in your own games, and put it out there for the public to see. Nice, Vishnu. That's great. So that's the idea, and a person who always submits a beautiful game. Maybe we need to see one of his losses, but I'm going to start with this guy's game, is Amit. Amit's been coming on the show for a long time now and has, I think, really improved, at least from the games that I've seen. And so let's look at this. Let's start off with Amit's game, a very nice, beautiful game, and he is black, so I'm going to switch this up here. And he plays the Benko, and I'm a big, not the Benko, the Benoni in the old school way, right? And yeah, this is the reason there's two problems with, with this. The first is that here, in this position, it's really hard to say that black is getting a reasonable opening after f4. It looks very hard to meet this move. The second problem, and I have more sympathy for the second problem, is that the Benoni in general, which the Benoni means the son of sorrow in Hebrew, the Benoni is going through a rough patch, and it's like people are crushing the Benoni, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about some of the ideas that are involved in the Benoni while we're talking about this. Let me just say for Amit that if he wanted to avoid both this f4 thing and also this strange system that his opponent played against him, it's not strange, but if he wanted to avoid it and still wanted to play the Benoni, then I think a clever way of doing it is to play e6 on move 2, and then if they play knight f3, then you can play the Benoni. And of course, if they play knight c3, then you play the Nimzo, which is, a beautiful counter-attacking opening as well. So that's my suggestion for the Benoni players out there. All right, let's take a look at what happened. This system with knight e2 is interesting in that there's a lot of systems being developed even against the King's Indian, where white is putting a knight on g3, and it doesn't look right at first. I think the old timers would have been upset by it. Let's go ahead and look at the knight going to g3. It doesn't look right because the pawn is dominated on g6. No, excuse me, rather the pawn on g6 is dominating the knight on g3 by taking away what seems to be all of its squares. But the knight on g3 is providing a valuable extra protection to e4 and claiming really that later with f4 everything's going to go white's way in terms of scrunching black. And a really important thing for black to understand here is that you really want to trade a piece or two, because that will alleviate a lot of the congestion that you have. And that's precise. When that happens, it really goes black's way. And it's honestly, it takes a lot of skill for white to not allow trades. And this is what we've talked about in the past, is a very clear example of a space advantage. And it takes skill to, play with that space advantage. Okay, let's take a look. h5. Now, h5 is controversial because white will ultimately start attacking you on the king side, and that move, will prove a weakness later. And Amit's right that after h5, white should probably play bishop g5. And that looks very dangerous. Let's just put that on the board. Okay. In the game, however, white went for f4. And we've talked in the show before about the dreams of Facundio. And Facundio is the f-pawn. And the f-pawn ultimately wants the rook to flow through it and the bishop to flow through it. If, however, that pawn on f4 ends up doing nothing, then it's just a complete liability for the bishop, the rook, and the king, right? So that's why anytime you play f4, it's against a variety of setups, right? It's going to be a controversial thing. All right, check out what Amit does. h4, all right. h3, very nice. And you see this in a lot of old-time games where you are securing really this square. And remember, the problem for black is that he doesn't have that much space. So getting a square where he can put his pieces on is very important for him, right? And of course, the h3 pawn is like a long-term thorn in white's king's position. Okay, g3, bishop g4, queen c2, maybe not the best square, but it's hard to give advice. Knight a6, beautiful. So we are simply wanting to trade and develop our guys. a3, hard to give advice again, and now check this out. Boom, very nice. Very nice move. This is something you see in a lot of Benoni positions where you're trying to disrupt white's play. And that's why you're going to give the tempo, the pawn rather, and you're going to get this square and you're going to get this diagonal. So I think already white's in big trouble. Snip, rook c8, and look at all of this. Is a beautiful example of how the Benoni can be so dangerous. A quote I like a lot comes from a friend, old-timer Stuart Rachels doesn't play anymore, but he had this great quote where he said, in the Benoni, white is always better, but black always has the chances, And it seems right, especially in a position like this. There's so many things that white can do wrong here. For example, on the natural bishop b5, I think we're going to say check to the miserable king and then do something like that. Then it's just all over. Also, he could consider taking, let's see, instead of bishop c4, he could take. But ba, I'm sure, is fine, but this is really nice too, with nice pressure here, and we're really threatening to play knight takes e4 already. And this is an unfortunate pin. So also lost. Knight c5, bishop e3, and simple and strong knight ce4. And now all of black's minors have come to life. There's high drama on the e-file, and now we can see that the dream of Facundio really hasn't worked out, right? We have firmly blockaded it. The bishop, the dark square bishop, is not moving through it. The rook is not moving through it. And by moving through it, I just mean you need to either play, you want or desire to play something like f5, or if you get e5 in, to get a bunch of trades in and then open the lines up for your guys. Okay, bishop e4, knight e4, rook a e1, and there's probably more than one way to win, but this is very simple, where we go knight g5, takes, and rook e3, and this is truly over. Great example of, I'm not really a bishop fiend, but this is the kind of position where people become bishop fiends, because they're so powerful, and once you get a taste of the bishops, you'll start looking for it in all kinds of other positions. So simply too strong here. Especially, they're both strong, but especially this guy, both on the preventing any counterplay and all of those beautiful dark squares. So knight f4. There might be simpler way or better ways for black to play here, but I like a lot what Amit did. He took some stuff and said, if you want to go into the end game, that's fine. Snip, snip. And I really like this move, f5. Not just advancing the pawns, but just making sure that this knight never gets in. And this is a great example of the two bishops, because what they can do is really control all of white's stuff. So if you just look at just this guy, for example, let's count his squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's already almost as much as the two knights combined. We've got this guy on c3's got 8, and this guy's got 6, right? So we've got 11 versus 14. The bishop is literally almost as strong as those two knights. And of course, we have another one. All right, very nice endgame technique to finish here. King comes up. Now we get the pawn, no rush. e4, very nice. Yeah, bring it all in. The king's playing too. Very nice play. And there's no rush here. White can't even move. Amit says Zugzwang. I don't know if it's technically Zugzwang, but it definitely feels like it. Yeah. You can move knight a4 or knight a2, but you're not moving anything after that. So beautiful game. And the next game I chose is kind of related to it. We have Paul in New Jersey is coming up next. He's also submitted several games. And I feel like a lot of the attacking potential that he gets in his game comes up, well, is similar to what we see here. Yeah, I agree, Vishnu. Beautiful, beautiful play by Amit. Yeah, beautiful. All right, let's look at how this goes. So, Paul's also black, so let's flip it up. And we got e3. Now, this is a totally viable way for white to play against the King's Indian, and I can tell that Paul was kind of unfamiliar with it. And so, particularly because there's a new idea that Caruana played, maybe we should talk about it a little bit. So, the first thing I want to say is that the technical reason why this move order is not right for white is that black can now play either this move or the next move. He can play d5. And the reason this is an improvement for black is because you've blocked in the bishop. That was your concession, right? But in this position, the knight is getting out. It's trading itself off, and we have a very nice Grunfeld position for black. So let me show you Caruana's idea, and that'll get to what white is kind of after, I think, with this e3 move. So Caruana plays this system, or several times played this system with e3. He wasn't the first GM to do this, but it was like a thing that he popularized simply because he's Caruana. And the idea of this beautiful setup is to say, well, if you decide to play d5, then when I take and I play e4, your knight has no squares, right? And there's even a nice kind of trick here with knight b6, castles, and if the natural-looking bishop g4, you play knight bd2, which is essentially a puzzle rush trick. And the point is that if bishop takes, I'm going to play knight takes, and you lose a piece. And there's no good way here for black to get out of dodge, because h3 is coming, and if knight c6, we have d5. So just a pleasant advantage for white in this position. But, you know, if you don't play bishop d4, there's other moves where black is just a little bit worse. That's the idea. Okay, so let's get back to what the other point is. Black could choose c5 going into a Benoni. And I actually covered that move in a recent video where I played as white against Vigorito in Denver. Or you can play d6 like a King's Indian. And this is the natural move. And we're going to see this structure in the game with Paul. Now, the thing to see about this position, the reason this has venom for black, is what white has got himself in is going to be a king's, well, black is going to be playing a King's Indian attack against the French. That's the trick, okay? That's the trick. And just to show you what I mean, let me show you a famous game. I'm just going to roll through it. Maybe you've seen this before. Great example. One can find the PGN analysis somewhere. Loeb, tell me what exactly you mean of a meat game, or what are we talking about? So while I'm waiting for that, let me show you this game. So Fischer had great trouble with the French and played this several times as an antidote, just to get a position with the King's Indian, but as white. Yeah, the game with the meat. Well, it's very simple to find. If you go to the thread, like if you go to forums on chess.com and click on our thread here for the member analysis, you will find Amit's game, because he posted the PGN there along with his notes. And I really recommend checking out people's notes. You know, I can't talk about all the things that people said. You know, but there's some very interesting, well-written notes, especially from, I think, people who've done this several times have really gotten into the experience of, you know, thinking deeply about their games without the computer. So there's some very valuable stuff to see there. Let me just roll through this. So bishop e7. This is Fischer Miag Mazurin, like 1967 or something like that. And what do we got? It's a King's Indian. And this position, I've actually had this as black several times. Very standard position, been seen a lot. And white is trying to simply mate on the king side. Here, there's all kinds of barbaric attempts. h5, knight h2, the whole business. Fischer plays a3. And I don't want to go into it too much, but let me just show the basic idea. If h5, a variation could go h3, b3, knight a7, h6, g6, I don't even know, something like that. Knight b5, and black will at least get this very annoying knight on c3. But the party's still going to continue, right? White is still coming to mate black over there. Okay, so a3, let me just roll through this because it's a fantastic game. A lot of these moves are, you can debate them. It's not like, it's not a perfect game, though it is a perfect finish. Bishop f6, the beginning of the mating combination. And this is just, the first time I saw this, I was a kid and I was kind of blown away. But now when I look at it, what you see is just the force count on the king side versus this poor king. As a kid, or maybe when you first see it, you're like, well, white had to calculate all this out in order to play a move like bishop f6. Yes, kind of, but maybe more important was that just intuitively you say to yourself, oh, this is winning. So here we go. Famous move, bishop g2, and you ask yourself, what's the point? The point is, here, queen f8, check, and it's over because snip, 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 mate. A really nice finish. Anyways, I just wanted to share that quickly to show a famous game and also what the dangers are for Paul when he plays this position again. Okay, so here we go. Bishop g7, e3, castles, bishop d3, and then this is a little bit different, but you could put the bishop on d3. But let's just say, what's the problem? The problem is you're going to have to deal with a threat of your pieces getting forked on e4. Okay, now here's the first thing I want Paul to see. Knight d7 is totally viable, and you're going to be playing in the footsteps of Fischer when you play knight d7. However, a move that I think is far more annoying and speaks to, I feel like, what's going on in this position is the move knight c6. The point is that, and this will help, I think, explain what's going on in the position and will probably help just King's Indian players in general. With knight c6, you're doing a couple things. Obviously, you're holding your bishop open, and that's always pleasant. You're also saying, when I play e5, I want to put pressure on d4. And that's also the whole idea in the main line, by the way, where Fischer was the one who played e5 and then knight c6 second. Putting pressure on the pawn, trying to get the thing to commit. Now notice, the whole idea of white's setup is to hold the d4 pawn, so to block this terrible beast out, right? Okay. Third point. White wants, like in that game with Miek Mizurin, white wants to play b4 and expand on the queen side. White's pawns are pointing this way, and if you've never been on the show, then the point is that the pointing of the pawns directs you where your play is going to be. Black is going to play e5, and he is pointing this way. As we saw in the Fischer game, he is trying to mate white on the king side. And it's very important that knight on c6 is preventing b4. Okay, let's proceed with the game. e5, queen c2, rook e8. Very nice note by Paul. I didn't want to play ed because that would open the position for the white bishop. I totally agree. And let's just add that we don't want to give up our one center pawn. In general, in the King's Indian, if you can avoid it, or unless you're getting something for it, you don't want to lose your big e5 pawn. And, maybe we're going to make him worry about this e4 problem. Okay, b4. Now, I think in general, what Black should say to himself is that he does not want to make pawn moves on the weak side. Same thing for white. His weak side is the king side. He, in general, doesn't want to make pawn moves over there. So that's why I'm critical of the move a5. And now, if you remember the Fischer game that I just showed, he played that weird move a3, and I didn't go into that much depth in it, but I don't think it's actually the greatest move. It was, it was a novelty at the time. And for the same reasons, he's making weaknesses on the side where Black needs to make counterplay. We're dealing, obviously, with reverse colors here. I think the moves we be looking at here are or really queen e7, actually. I don't want I don't want to look at any other moves. I want to play queen e7 and make him worry about e4. Later on, he has chances to do this too, so I'm wondering maybe Paul was worried about something like knight b5. But, you know, here it's just, yes, you can win this pawn and stuff, but I think it's a bummer for white because the minor pieces are going to be very strong, and we'll get the knight, we'll get him back, I believe anyway. And even if that weren't the case, we would, if we somehow believe that that wasn't possible, we could play c6. Also on queen e7, if knight b5, misplacing the thing, if we wanted to, we could even do that, and we're fine. The knight on b5 is misplaced. So yeah, there's a later point too where Paul doesn't play queen e7, and I kind of don't get it. Because you want white to commit, right? The whole idea of the King's Indian really is to make this pawn commit. The French player, too, when you play e6, d5, you're trying to get the e4 pawn to commit. It's a very similar idea. Okay, so. All right, rook a5, rook a8, fine. h3, why is it a mistake? Because it's making a weakness on the wrong, on that side of the board. It doesn't even serve any point as far as I can tell. So here again, I want queen e7. Paul writes, I considered c6 and knight b6. I think c6 is playable, and, I assume you were worried about the knight b5 again. But here's where maybe the Fischer game will even help, is that you could look at knight f8 and be like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that or something. But that's what he did too. And the idea is you are starting an engine over here. This thing is coming, and honestly, the idea of later putting a knight here and sacking it here, it's not the dumbest thing. Your attack is over there. You are destined to murder that man. So yeah, b6, making some of your own weaknesses here. And in general, white's plan after something like b6 is to play a4, a5 to open things up. He needs to make some moves. Now, d5, terrible move. Knight c5. Why is it terrible? First of all, like h3, it's wasting a tempo. And let's say some basic stuff here. In this position, white clearly was experiencing some spiritual duress. Now, I know that sounds funny, right? Talk about spiritual duress. But we've all felt it. We've got some position. We have no idea what to do. And like I said, something like a4 expanding on the queen side. White must murder white. White has to create at least drama on the queen side before he gets mated on the king side. And so he doesn't know what he's doing, h3. And again, d5. So now he's switching up the position entirely. And this is terrible from a variety of perspectives. The first, of course, is that you're just allowing knight c5. The second we should really add, though, is you're blundering e4. And this rook is hanging at the end. So that was also available. All right. That e4 trick, by the way, if you play the King's Indian long enough, it'll come up again and again. Knight c5, e4. Now let me just say why I think this position is terrible for white. Right. Notice what he did. He started off with that beautiful e3, d4 structure, which was holding the d4 pawn, was holding this knight at bay, and it was stopping this bishop. In the King's Indian, if you can hold the c5 square, it is a major deal, right? And now that knight is not going anywhere. Okay, let's now consider white's further crimes. And by the way, we're going to make fun of white a little bit here, but this is something that we can all understand because he doesn't know what to do already for several moves now. And as we've said on the show before, mistakes come in pairs. And sometimes they come in more than pairs. And the reason that happens is you reach some position where you have no idea what's going on. All right, bishop e3. And white has a terrible intention here. And that is to take on c5. Oh, no. Don't do it, buddy. That is your beautiful dark square bishop. And if you lose him, you have nothing. You have nothing at all. So when you think of white's pieces, the bishop on d2, the dark square bishop, is by far the strongest piece. Why? Because these pawns are all on light squares. In a similar way, this bishop is beautiful. It's because the black pawns are on dark squares, so it's allowed to move. All right. So, c6, I don't like it. And the main reason is now, especially after you've played b6, you have weaknesses, right? And what is the advantage, really, of playing c6? Now, Paul writes he should have considered knight h5. Absolutely, right? We've now reached a standard King's Indian position, and it's time to murder. It's time for death. White has committed all the standard crimes, and whether we play after knight h5, we can even wait and see what we want to do. We can either play knight f4 or f5, depending on how this thing goes. I think, like I said, basically lost for white. And the reason is he has no plan for busting open the queen side. And so c6, I still like black. That's how good his position is. But c6 is going to give opportunities for white to at least get some play. Now, let's imagine I was talking to white. I would say, listen, I know you intended to take on c5 last move, and that was wrong then too, but think about it now. Your opponent just made a pawn move which dramatically changes the nature of the position. That is your clue. Whenever your opponent does this, it changes the structure of the position, to rethink your assumptions. Because everything is changed now. Everything's different. We've got weak pawns, right? This rook suddenly could say to himself, oh, maybe I'll come over here and talk to this guy. And now with c6, like this square is going to be tender for the knight and maybe other pieces. And if you take, then maybe this knight is going to show up on c4, right? Loads of problems suddenly for conceivable counterplay, let's say, for white against the black position. All right, white was in for his exchange, and he does it. Now finally knight h5, very good. King h2, knight f4, simple and strong. Knight e2. I don't have any great advice for the guy, but knight e2, it's definitely played with the wrong intention, which was taking it. Terrible. Actually, I guess he's already in deep trouble, so I don't have any great advice for the guy now. But if that was your intention, you just loosed the beast. You loosed the beast, and let's go a couple more moves, and I'm going to say a couple things. Rook a b1, f3, very nice move, very nice tactic, and the point is, first he takes, and then bishop h3. Beautiful, beautiful. And I wrote here, I said, looks like a Benko, right? Because white has that pawn, and we have that beautiful dark square bishop. Knight h2, so the knight is now bad, but you know there's a threat here of playing bishop g2 and queen g4, so he feels like he has to do something. Now, I want to read the note that Paul writes here, and I want him to feel some critique here, because this will be important for your future both as a King's Indian player, as an attacker. So he says after bishop d7, I realized my attack, in quotes, was going nowhere. Bishop e5 would have been met with g3. Paul, let's take a moment, buddy, and just reflect on the beauty of your position. You are completely crushing in this position, and let's just talk about some basic reasons why. This guy's a monster, an absolute beast, and he can do things here, he can do things here, it hurts him that touching this square. It hurts him you're touching this square. Even this square it hurts him that you're touching it. He can't get behind his own pawn. This guy's terrible. Hitting an absolute rock. No idea what that thing is doing. Look at this beautiful rook, ready to sweep down. Look at this guy, also ready to come down. And this bishop, beautiful, beautiful piece. So you are totally winning in this position. And I want you to do a thought experiment, actually. Let's say we put our bishop d7. I don't like that move, but let's say we give white a pawn. Let's give him a pawn. Let's give him a pawn. Why not? Right? Black's still much better, arguably winning. And I realize many people might say to themselves, what are you talking about, Cry? How can he be winning? He's down a pawn. No, this is the standard Benko business. This is the Benko business. This pawn is toast. There's all kinds of weaknesses. And there's no play for white. So even if you do something like rook a7, rook a8, you're still, I guess maybe even winning. Because he's doing nothing to you. And the unopposed bishop on g7, absolute monster. So yes, you have an attack. You have an attack all over the board here. I do like bishop e5 better, because even here, then we'll just, I don't know, put it somewhere like f6 or h6. And I feel like that's game. You know, can't move, and now my bishop it just has a very nice home on h3. Okay. I thought here, Paul, I would show you a game of mine from back in the day. It just occurred to my memory when I was looking at this game, because I could feel that you didn't feel the power of your bishop. So I'm going to show you a game I played. This is against GM Vinaybot. I think at the time we were actually both IM. So this is a long time ago. Let me show you this game. And I don't want to go over the whole thing, though it was interesting. I just want to get to a position. Let's just get it over here. I was black. And white has clearly done a fecundio with f4, and it is not necessarily helpful. Okay. Bishop, knight b6. This is a very simple plan here. So I am going to exchange that knight, and I am going to say that the bishop, which will come to g7 or h6, will be mammoth against the white king. And in fact, I guess it's really close to lost after he takes on b6. And I don't have any great advice for him. Now, in the show I did last Wednesday, I covered an opposite color bishop position against Tatev from the Denver Open, Tatev Abrahamian. And this game actually stands out in my memory as being one of the first games where I really understood the bishops of opposite color. And in your game, Paul, what you had is you had the two bishops, obviously, but what you needed to see was that the bishop on g7 was super strong. So I feel like this position is great for black, and your position was even better. Okay, so let's play a couple moves. Bishop g7. He tries to run for the border. We go for the attack. Queen d8. Oh, it's brutal. Look at that. Now, generally, I don't want to trade rooks, but that pawn is nice. Very hard for black-white to do anything. Oh, man. And it's all over. So the point is, when you got that beautiful dark square bishop and the guy's just hitting granite on g6, you're the one, right, who has the initiative. And because you're the one who has the initiative, it's like you have an extra piece on those dark squares. So I indulged myself in showing this game from forever. I hadn't looked at this thing in a long time. But like I said, it was my opening intellectually to the power of the opposite color bishops. And yeah, it's a similar thing a little bit to what was going on to your game. All right, let's go back. We haven't even finished. Paul, I'm taking forever on your game, but that's okay. Rook fe1. You're doing great here. Rook e1. That move I didn't really understand. That move I didn't understand. And now, why would we trade queens? You know, that his king is worse, so let's not trade. Queen d4, and we get some trades. Are we still winning? I think so. I think so. Beautiful. And then you miss this tactic. Okay, so let's think about this position. And let's even think about the position after you made this mistake. It's obviously not fun to have made this mistake, right? But let's just consider it. I think we should say this is still totally winning for you. And I haven't even looked. I didn't turn on the computer here, or I haven't looked too deeply. I just assume that it's winning. But this move can't be it, right? No, we don't want to do that one. Now, the simplest move, I guess, is just to put your bishop on g4. But even if you did something, I don't know, like bishop c3, aren't you totally in? Yeah, you're in charge here. He's not touching you, right? Yeah, you're doing absolutely fantastic. Your rook's better. The bishop on d3 is still terrible. And the crime I want you to see is that when you allow this trade, the knight now gets a beautiful square, and you relieved white of his terrible, terrible bishop on d3. And now after knight d3, I have no idea what's going on. And here's a simple and dogmatic thing that Smyslov said, that in positions with pawn weaknesses, the knight is superior. And remember, that guy comes from a generation where they basically thought knights and bishops were equal. That they thrived in different positions, but they were fundamentally equal. And this is the kind of position I think he would say, you know what, my knight isn't necessarily worse anymore than your bishop, because he's got maneuvering potential. Okay. Rook a1. Ay, ay, ay. No. Your rook is better than his rook. Play bishop d4. Now I'm freaked out, right? Like now, I don't know why. Now I guess we're worse, you know. c5 certainly is a thought for white. Why not? But there's also no rush. So g3. I didn't like that. I liked his knight on d3. Right, now we just bounce back and forth. Could white have gone for more? Probably not in this position. But before, I think definitely he could have at least tried to massage you, because you're the one with the weakened pawns. Maybe just look briefly before he goes crazy with knight b4. Yeah, it's certainly possible to massage here, because it might not be, I wanted that c5 move earlier, but if you ever move the bishop, it's going to be a problem. Yeah, you could probably still hold this. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies here, right? Okay, Paul, great game, and what I want you to realize going forward is, when you play the King's Indian, if you want to play the King's Indian, we're going to cover a game from Vishnu a little later. He's a King's Indian fanatic. The King's Indian is built for the people who feel like punching other people in the face. That's what it was built for. It's a violent opening, and if you play it, you have to be ready to throw the big punch. As you're going to get the positions like Amit gets in, you have to sense that, oh, right, the reason I'm playing this opening is when I get that pawn or he makes a movement on the king side, I'm coming for him, right? Well, Vishnu, you posted this beautiful picture of a King's Indian book on Twitter, so I assumed that maybe that's what you were doing. Yeah. I think you should play. I think people who are interested in the initiative should play the King's Indian. All right. let's go to our next game. This is Marty from SF. And we're going to shift gears totally and talk about an endgame. Or let's just say how to play an endgame. Marty makes incredible crimes in this game. And let's make fun of him, but we're going to try to do it in a therapeutic way where you can realize in this game that Marty is a strong player and he's going to totally misplay a rook endgame. And what I want you people to realize, and Marty as well, you people, you guys, realize, is that I see this all the time. And what this example should show you is that if you spend a little time thinking about the rook endgame, just thinking about some of the things I'm going to say here, you don't even necessarily have to have an incredible grasp of all of the technical rook endgame stuff, but you do need to think about what the goals are in the rook endgame. If you have that in you, the rook endgame is the most common of the endgames. If you have that in you, you will find that these players, such a good player like Marty, will lose a position he has no business losing in a rook endgame. And I see it all the time. This is how the Russians always used to beat us fish here in the United States, and to a certain extent it's what the old guys are trying to do when they play the young, even now. Okay, let's take a look at this game. This is against Elliot Winslow, an older IM with some experience, and I think what we're going to get is precisely this thing of experience in the rook endgame. Now, c3, I approve of this message. I think the Smith-Morra is a great opening, and your opponent doesn't want to fight you. He plays knight f6, e5, knight d5. And here's the next move that I don't get. You played c4. And, right, you know, the whole point is to get this pawn. So what we're doing, by the way, what black is doing is he's transposing into a c3 Sicilian. So if you imagine c3, knight f6, e5, knight d5, d4, cd, we've transposed. And honestly, if I was black playing Sicilian, this is probably what I would do too, because I don't want to take that pawn on c3. I have no desire to take that thing. All right, so c4 is played, which I think is really weird. CD or just knight f3. This pawn isn't going anywhere right away. So yeah, I don't get c4, and I also don't get Elliot's next move. I feel like this Elliot now is gonna, the next several moves, he's gonna descend into a bad position. And to me, the natural move would be either, well, definitely knight b4 intending a later knight c6 is natural, or just knight c7 intending knight e6 and knight c6. Both of those look fine. The problem with knight b6 is I don't know what you're doing on b6. And even though Elliot's an IM with some experience, we're going to see that that knight is going to continue to poison black for the rest of, or at least the next phase of the game, until Marty trades it off. Okay, so knight f3, bishop f4, d6. And I think, yeah, he wasn't aware of the problems here. And I guess you just have to do like ed6 now and say you're slightly worse, for black has to say that. He plays this, and bishop e2, very nice, simple development. e5, strange. Marty says, thank you, Mr. IM. I will hold all the trumps. White is clearly better. Okay. Castles. Let's read what Marty writes. Got itchy about having the king in the center, but there are at least two better moves. Bishop takes d4 and c5. That might all be true, but castles is a very prudent move. You are certainly up in development. You give one pawn back, and you're better. And you remain up in development. So let's take a look. b3. Not the only move, but a good move. And this is what Marty writes, this is not a happy square for the queen. It needs to move, but it's probably better to keep it on the king's side if it can't stay centralized. This phase of the game, Marty, I think you're doing fine. Now, sometimes when we lose, we look back at moves that we did and we create narratives as to why things went wrong. But through this, you're doing great. I would say you're either clearly better or winning. I'm going to tend towards winning, with the simple idea that one of your advantages is you're up a pawn, and your second advantage is that that knight is terrible. He owes you some time. So yeah, I think you're doing great. Remember, just the principle of two weaknesses. If you have two weaknesses, you'll be winning. And that pawn chain is really a beast working against the two black minor pieces. Bishop f5, queen f6. I don't like this move, bishop e4. You know, he's obviously trying to do something about the b7 pawn, and it is a drag. But think about it. That knight is still sitting there. The knight isn't getting fixed. Queen c2, rook at e1, snip, snip, g3. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. h5. Now, this is the violent flailings of an IM who wants to trick you. And I think this is it's not good, what he's doing. And let's just say why. Because his knight isn't in the game. Now, why isn't he leaving it on b6? Because he doesn't want your own knight to come to d5. And with h5, the guy is like saying, well, I'm going to attack you. But think about it. In a lot of ways, you're the one that's essentially up a piece here. You're up a piece on the king's side because you have a knight and he doesn't. And the knight is doing valuable stuff on the defense. It's even controlling this entry square. So I'm trying to say this h5 move shouldn't freak us out. I don't really feel like h4 is that big of a threat, but you played h4 and I think it's okay. And Elliott continues to forget about his knight. Now, queen c1. I'm not thrilled. Let's just say this. The guy is playing with fire. His king is weaker than yours. It's not like he's not the one on the attack. No. So here's a simple move. Always ask yourself, can I bring this guy in? And I think you can. On a move like queen g6, we're going to play rook e1, threatening knight f6. Well, good times ahead, right? And we can protect this rook in a couple of different ways, like rook e3. This knight is dead. This knight is not going anywhere, right? We're doing great. So queen c1. And now here's the thing that I want you to see. I'm going to call it very much psychological. I feel like in this position, you feel like the guy is attacking you. There's probably already a lot of residual stress from having to play this higher rated guy and stuff. And here you kind of, you bail out, or you try to bail out, and you commit a high crime. Remember this crime, Marty. Remember it. You willingly not only give up your extra pawn, but you free him from that terrible, terrible beast on b6. Here's an interesting thought. Gina writes, I actually feel like people who play aggressive chess are the ones who are calm and soft-hearted in real life. The ones who like grinding out endgames are the ones who like to punch people in the face. That probably means I'm the one guy who likes to punch people in the face. There might be some truth to that. It's the romantics, really, that like to play the King's Indian. And when I say punch people in the face, I don't really mean punching people in the face in real life. I mean, of course, on the chessboard. Though maybe it's true about some King's Indian players. It's, of course, always interesting to wonder about, what the traits of people and how that comes across in their chess life and career. And it does take a meanness for sure to grind out an endgame. There's no doubt about that. I think I have some of that meanness in me. But right, I definitely do think, on the other hand, just in terms of chess playing, that there are players who like the initiative and who are good at it. And I think, for example, we're going to cover Vishnu's game later. I think he's one of the players that comes on this show who I think thrives with the initiative. And some people really don't like to play the slow, passive things. They want to start some drama early. That's different styles of play. Anyways, lost my train of thought. We got on this thing. It's understand. We've all done it, Marty. By the way, right? We've played some higher rated guy, and we had a nice position. We start bailing out because we see all of these things that look like threats, even though I don't think it's that big of a deal. For example, this knight. Here's an example of this knight doing duty over here. King g2 looks nice. We can play rook h1, and I don't know why we're worse. I like your position a lot, honestly. Hard to imagine he's going to survive on that. I really don't see it. The knight's out. He's down a knight. Okay, so let's now get to the endgame phase. Rook d1, queen f5, queen f4. This is like begging for a draw. And what I want you to see is that when you start begging for a draw, well, it's what the guy wants. Now, let me say this. I don't think there's any need to beg for the draw. If anyone's better here, it's still you. You're the one in charge of this thing. Why? Because your king is better, right? You can do moves like rook d4. I imagine queen h6 is a thought. I imagine maybe king g2, queen c4 is a move. You've got loads of moves here where you are simply better. And queen f4, black's not winning necessarily, but what we have to acknowledge is that now black is the one who has a little bit of juice. And rook e4, I'm not even sure that's the best move, honestly, with rook e4. Honestly, actually, I'm gonna say right away, I'm not thrilled with rook e4. But I still think you're in the realm of drawing this thing. It's getting close, though. One more mistake, and I think we're toast. Why is rook e4 funny? Because it's allowing rook d7. And I think this is maybe the first. Let's start talking about the rook endgame now. Let's think about this position beginning, right? Both rooks have the potential to be active, right? This king, when you think about his activity, it's now going to be blockading this pawn, right? If the pawn even gets to h3, as long as the king is hanging out as the blockader, then it has a valuable role. And in fact, the pawn is just in danger if he can't break the blockade, which seems doubtful that he'll be able to do easily. So the h-pawn running right now isn't that big of a deal. It's only going to become a thing if the black king manages to shepherd his pawn way up there. And that brings us to the simple point that is the kind of thing that black should be looking for, namely to start shepherding the pawn. Rook e4, I don't like. It's actually kind of a question of, well, what, you can ask, well, what do you like, Kron? I guess I like this one, and I can imagine a variation maybe going like this. Rook d7, rook snip, king g7, and maybe black has a smidge of an advantage. On rook e4, though, it's very simple. You play rook d7, and there's no reason to think that you're worse. You've got the rook on the 7th, and I guess he should play rook b4, because if rook f4, I guess I like white. And there's the simple reason that my rook continues to be better. I'm going to have a passer, and my king is all set up to be the blockader of this pawn. When you think about rook endgames, think about the kings as being related to the passed pawns or potential passed pawns, both for the defender and the attacker. The attacker wants to shepherd the pawn and break the blockade, and the defender wants to be the blockader of the pawn. As I said before, even if the pawn gets way down there, as long as the king is sitting in front of it, it's going to be fairly useless. In fact, it will be a liability. So why would I rather be white here, even though I think this is drawn? Because when we run our pawns, there's no king to easily sit there to be the blockader. Could white have taken advantage of black's isolated pawns before he traded? Yes. We didn't want to trade queens for sure. I think I mentioned rook d4. And you're better because in the heavy endgame, it's all about who has the better king. Okay, so first point there. Now, let's go to the game. Rook d5, and Paul correctly writes that the wrong target. Now, remember, just because that pawn's advancing, it doesn't mean that much because our king is still firmly on the blockade. So here's the next crime. You can still play rook d7, rook g5, and we're chasing this pawn that's kind of doomed anyway. And now look, now our rook is off sides, and now we're in distinct trouble. Notice that our pawn on f4 is not a great guy. f5. I guess I would prefer something like rook h5 in general, because on f5 you allow the king to become active. And the pawn's going to fall, but that isn't necessarily the end. The question will be all about black creating a passed pawn on the queen side. And this looks grim, doesn't it? It looks really grim. So let's think about this position and ask ourselves, what if anything we could do here, because it has become very difficult. So let's say some obvious things. The pawn on f4 is an extra pawn, but it's not that special, right? So that's the first thing. We need to improve the position of our king. It's really important. The maybe simplest thing to do is to play king g2, and on either rook b2 or rook a3, get ready to play rook h3. And you could maybe even start with rook h3. Bring the rook around, start advancing your king, and it's going to be close. He's going to have winning chances, but it's not over. Notice that what's going on here is black's king got very active, and white still has some drawing chances, but of course we're going to have to give up the f-pawn. All of these moves didn't help that much. Okay, so here we go. What is the verdict? Probably lost. I'm going to say it is lost, because now the shepherd is going to connect to his pawn, and this king is cut from the return. Even without the f-pawns, it's very difficult to hold this thing now. Good move. Good move. Simple chess. And now it's all over. So, some very basic things. I feel like a lot of rook endgame books are intimidating because they're full of a bunch of variations. And one of the things I've gotten out of both variations and problems, like there's a lot of problem books with rook endgames that I think are very helpful. But what I've gotten out of them is just some basic things, and you have to ask yourself, what does it mean to be active in the rook endgame, right? And I think this game and a lot of the other games that we've seen in the past here show, I think, what it means to be active, right? What it means for the king to be active, both the defender and the aggressor, and what it means for the rook to be active. As an example of what I'm talking about, if you think about the Philidor position, right? The Philidor position, imagine we've got, I'll tell you what, I'll just put that on the board here. It's such an important thing. We better just do it right. And how do I do this? I'm going to clear the board. And the standard position that we got here, this is one of the fundamental positions that you need to know. And before I say what I'm going to extrapolate from this, let's just show the mechanism. If white farts around, we fart around. We wait, and we wait, and we wait, and then when he pushes, which he has to do, then we go back. And the point is now, on king g3, boom. We're going to start checking him from behind, and he can't ever kick our king out of this beautiful blockade square, right? If you happen to be in this position and you're white and you're playing somebody who's not that strong, you will find even people over 2,000 do not know this position. I guarantee it. And even if they know it, you can massage them sometimes and they'll break. If you go, for example, let's say rook c8, all of a sudden now stuff isn't so simple, right? And I just want to show this because the point is we are going to break the blockade. Check, and this king has got to get out of there. It's all over. Now I can do the same thing with the Lucena position, but the basic thing I want you to observe, it's the point of the aggressor is to break the blockade, and black, or the defender, holds it. That's the definition of what king activity in general means in the rook endgame. Wocho, thank you so much. All right, let's do another game. Where am I here? We got Vishnu now. All right. So d4, d5. You don't see this too much anymore, this triangle thing. I think it's beautiful. Nice deal for black. It creates a lot of drama for white. And Vishnu writes that he'd like to play e4 here. I'm not sure about e4. It's a very theoretical thing. Let me see if I can even remember like the main idea. This is like ancient theory where some madness like this goes down. And there's a lot of theory here that I'm not even going to pretend to understand. And it's a very technical endgame that can arise from this position. He writes, Watson recommends e3, and that's totally plausible, but most black players, I think, who play this triangle stuff are happy to see e3 because they're then going to go into a slightly favorable version of the stone wall. And when I say favorable, I mean better than it normally is, right? Yeah, black has a nice attacking structure here with f5. So your move, knight f3, I'm going to say that's your move. That's a good move for your style of play. And if anything, maybe we can talk about what happens next in terms of the attack that you're going to get. So snip. You could play a4 here, by the way, which I don't think is your style. But let's just look at a4 briefly. There's all kinds of madness with bishop b4 and b5 and a5, the whole drama, right? So, but let's look at what you did. I like it a lot. What you're essentially doing is almost transposing to this variation that you might find yourself getting in a different way. Let's say, how would I do this? c6, knight f3, knight f6. Am I doing this right? Oh no, here's how you do it. Yeah, the line would go like this. c6, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, dc e4. This is a very well-known thing, and it's very dangerous for black. And I just want to show kind of a main idea is like b5, e5, and you say to yourself, you know what? I've got really something very close to a French structure here, and I'm going to murder you on my side of the board. So knight d5, and then I believe knight g5 is very dangerous. Yeah, this is really hard to deal with. I'm touching some light squares. I got this, and there's been many games here. It might be technically equal in some computer sense. And that might be like why top GMs don't do this as often as they do. Many players still do. But this thing is wildly dangerous. And if you just spend a little bit of time with this, I feel like your attacking instincts, you can use them in this kind of position. Because black is under incredible stress here. All right, so what am I saying? It's going to be a similar deal in this position because it's going to be hard for him not to put the knight on f6 eventually. Many different moves are playable for you here, and if anything it's a little bit weird because he hasn't put the knight on f6 yet. But let's say a4 is okay, in spirit anyway. Other moves, maybe if you wanted to come close to transposing to the other thing, queen c2 is a thought. Notice that you even have the right in this position to start thinking about moves like h4. Because the king's side is going to be your side of the board. And he can be happy about his pawn grab, but you are playing for mate on the king's side. All right, so a4, bishop b4. Now, let's just say that that's kind of typical for what he's doing in this system, but that the bishop on b4 is a little bit unhappy there because it doesn't ever want to trade itself off. That's the glue of the black position, right? It's the dark squares, and you know, you've got it, since you have your pawns all on light squares, it's the dark squares that are vulnerable. Bishop d2, a5. And so he's following like a template. You know, he's probably never seen bishop d2 or anything like that, but he's following a template from the madness that often develops in this variation. I think it's officially called something like the, oh right, here it is on chess.com. They always tell me it's the note boom. I used to think, by the way, when I was a kid, I was like, is that because like somebody wrote a lot of notes on it or something that it became the note boom? You know? But no, it's some Dutch guy whose name is like Noteboom. All right. So I don't understand why. No, Vishnu says he has thought for 13 minutes on this position, and he doesn't like the fact that he spent so long on it. But I think this is totally valid to think about. I assume that black's intention on AB is that he's going to give me his beautiful bishop. But, well, I'll take that bishop. That looks pleasant to me. So that's definitely a thought. I would definitely want to consider that. I would definitely also want to consider this move b3 to open up the light square bishop. And let me just say about this kind of pawn grab that can happen in a lot of different Slavs is that if you're going to do it, the real value of it is that it's, yes, you got your pawn, but what the pawn is doing is it's making it difficult for this guy to breathe, right? And that's why it probably hurt you psychologically, especially as an attacking player, to play bishop e2. I get it. Now, another move I think you can consider is queen c2. And what we're going to see is something kind of similar happens in the game is if knight f6, e5, and you can still do this knight g5 stuff. and you definitely have an attack. Okay, so knight f6, queen c2, h6. Right. The guy, I'll tell you what he feared. You could tell in his notes, from his notes, that Vishnu thinks this is a very weird move, and it is pretty weird. It would hurt me to play it as black. But what black correctly fears is that if he castles, there's immediate play against the king like this. For example, g6, and there might be more. There's more than one move here. There's h4, and also the idea of queen e4 and sliding over. Even knight e4 is unpleasant. So a lot of different plans here for white. Beautiful standard attacking idea against the king. And one question I'm sure black might ask himself here is, well, if that's the case, maybe it would be clever to not commit the knight to f6 right now. So other moves that come to mind are simply waiting, like bishop b7 and knight d7, or if you really feel like you need to move the knight, to go ahead and you could put it on e7. Because I feel like white wants to play e5 anyway. The knight wants to go to e4, and we want to start moving our pieces to the king, as is going to happen in this game. So, knight f6, queen c2, h6. It's obviously dangerous to play h6. Castles. Now, one thing, Vishnu, I think you should consider here is to say, you, buddy, made a pawn move on the wrong side of the board, and I'm now going to waste you for it. Right. So, there's several ways that you can start attacking the black king here. The first one immediate thing that should come to mind is that you've got ideas of g4, g5. And for that reason, maybe your king can sit for a little bit in the center still. And I realize probably with bishop e2 already in your mind, you were thinking, okay, I'm going to castle. Another very basic idea for you is to play e5, knight d5, queen e4, intending queen g4. For example, castles and either queen g4 now or soon, right? And yeah, you have some initiative. Okay, so castles, e5, very good. Knight e4, very good. And my sense is, Vishnu, that you weren't quite familiar with the ideas in this position, but ultimately you found your way to them. So bishop e7 was played, and Vishnu gives that a funky move mark. And it is a little funky. And he says knight d7 was better. And one question I have about black is, he is clearly aware of the knight g5 problem, right? He's clearly aware of it. And so maybe what he was concerned with was knight g5 anyway. Now, I don't know. But, I get why it's scary. I guess now you either have to play g6 or you have to play f5. This is very speculative, but let's say on f5 you can claim that you have fine compensation here. And on g6, the problem is it's going to be hard for the pieces to get over there. Now, there is a bummer, unfortunately, for white here, and that is that the knight is being, it's hard. I want to play queen e4, but I can't because this is hanging. So there is that bummer. I was just pondering knight e6. We at least have a draw, but anyways, I'm trying to explain why the guy played bishop e7. I think I'm trying to get inside his head. Okay. Queen c1. Now look, this is what I mean. about punching people in the face. Look at Vishnu is just like, bam, I'm gonna do it to you, buddy. I'm gonna come at you like a spider monkey. Very interesting. Now, I'm sure if I was in this position, because I'm a boring dude, I wouldn't think about that. My first instinct would be, let's do something like b3. I probably would have played b3 already. And that's the instinct of somebody who just wants to put pressure on that weakened queen side. Queen c1 is the move of a man who wants to punch you in the face. And the thing about playing these people, I've played a lot of people who try to punch me in the face, is it's psychologically very difficult because you start seeing threats and you get it in your head that you're about to get wasted, and you might truly be about to get wasted. And it's a question mark, like, how big of a threat is this? Okay, so let's look at this thing. F5 was played. I'm pretty sure that's what I would have done too. Vishnu gives it a question mark and says panicking, further weakening the king, and suggests king h7. But I tell you, I'm certain I wouldn't want to do king h7 because if I'm the defender here, the only reason I think I might have a chance is because the bishop on e2 is not in the game. By putting the king on h7, however, you are encouraging the bishop to get on that diagonal. And there's two ways to do it. You can play the lame-o bishop d1, c2, or you can say, hey, buddy, take my pawn, and then play bishop d3 and don't even worry about the pawn on b3. And this is nerve-wracking, right? Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. Yeah, or b3, that's right. Okay, so I like queen c1. I want to especially praise even as a practical move. f5, though, is what he wants to do, I feel. He needs, like in the French, f5 is the move where you are going to free your pieces, especially your heavies, to come over to help your king. All right, so knight g3, avoiding exchanges. I was wondering about this. The argument for taking on f6 is to say, well, that knight is really his best defender. And I want to, start the party soon against all of his squares in the center. Vishnu, of course, wants the king. A very simple way of playing, for example, would be knight f6, let's say bishop f6, and something even as lame as rook e1. At some point, we want to play b3. We could play b3 maybe even instead of rook e1. Anyways, that's just some of my intuitions. I would be worried that the knight wouldn't find a way into the game. Knight d7, bishop h6 anyway. Bam! Look at this guy. Oh, you guys, wait. I have an announcement to make. So I had this absolutely miserable tournament this last weekend. It was a huge personal catastrophe for me. Chess has become a burden upon my soul. But Vishnu was there and came and gave me this beautiful book. Look at that. So on the show, and maybe on the other one, it might have been on this show or the other one, I talked about how friends of mine were talking, Eugene Perelstein amongst others, Gregory Serper, we're talking about how this was one of the greatest books they'd ever read. And anyways, on that show, I was like, well, I had to get it as a PDF because it costs like $1 gazillion on eBay. And I felt bad about it because, I wrote a book myself and I feel moral problems with, using stuff, for free that I didn't pay for. But I couldn't get the book. So anyways, Vishnu gave me this fantastic gift, alleviated a lot of my spiritual pain from what I was dealing with the tournament. Okay, bishop h6. Is it the right move? I kind of don't know. But he evokes knight h7, and knight h7 definitely isn't right. Let's look at this. So pawn takes, queen takes, rook f7, and then I believe knight g5. Right. Now, he says that Stockfish is talking about queen f8. That seems totally plausible to me. But also, like, I would be worried about just knight f8. Right? Maybe there's some amazing mate there that I don't see, but I don't necessarily see it yet. And the problem is, for white, is that when you sack the two pieces for the rook when you're on the attack, you're generally giving up your attackers, right? And that's the bummer, is all of a sudden these black pieces, these defenders, are swarming onto us. Knight f8, or like the computer said, queen f8, bringing the queen toward her man. And I guess the virtue of queen f8 is now you really are kind of forced to take the exchange with knight f7, and yeah, I'd rather be black. This still the game's going on, but I'd rather be black. Okay, let's look at how this finished. Knight h7, bishop e3, bishop f6, knight h5. Let's talk about this move. Yeah, let's think about this for a second. So, long term, we really have to like white's position because his king is much better than his opponent's. In addition, black has a problem piece with this guy. He's got some weak pawns. Nothing is making sense. This is like nothing is making sense in the position for him. So what he does, black's move, isn't the greatest, and he plays bishop f6. That's his best piece, and I get it where we might want to go hunting that piece. But on the other hand, think about it. What is he doing? He needs to get his dudes fixed on the queen side, and bishop f6 isn't doing it. Further, he is taking squares from his knights, both of which kind of want to go to f6. So by playing knight h5 and kind of intending knight f6, we're alleviating some of the tension. Now still, let's ask ourselves, what would we rather like better? Actually, Vishnu has a suggestion. He likes rook d1 followed by knight e5. That seems fine. We can still think about b3, by the way. And there's the very simple bishop d1 to c2. I might like that even better. But if we did want to touch that bishop on h5, why don't we play knight e4? Right? Isn't that the natural square for the knight if we're going to do this? It's just, now it's a beautiful square. You know, beautiful square. Okay, so knight h5. He finally plays bishop b7. Knight d2. Notice what we're doing. We're chasing the e4 square with the other knight. By the way, there's still aspects of this that resemble the French, and our blockade square is e5. And so when we do this, first of all, we develop the queen, and now we're getting rid of our blockader here on the e5 square. Knight b6, I'm not, okay, whatever, it's fine. Look at this, he goes back. No, don't go back, buddy. Don't go back. Play knight d5 or something, anything but that move. Yeah, it's like he wanted it there. Snip, snip, b3, very nice. Now we're going to finally bust him open. And here's a simple thing about playing chess that I think is so brutal. You know, when you're studying, you can have some very deep thoughts, and you can feel kind of ennobled by the thoughts you're having. And then you go to play a game, and maybe you have made some really nice moves in that game, but you really can throw it away all at once. And everyone does it, you know, even the greatest do it. So you're not alone, but it's just a bummer that we all blunder like this with bishop b5. And, you know, obviously Vishnu was under the impression that this guy was pinned, the pawn on a4, but unfortunately, it is simply not pinned, right? It is simply not pinned. Yeah. Scannon, thank you so much for the feedback. Yes, I hope you submit some of your games. And Blobe, who played me, we did a sub Saturday a couple weekends ago, and he turned me on to Chess 960, and there he's got a clip there where I'm playing the Castle 960 stuff. I had never played it, and Blobe was the guy who turned me on to it, so that was kind of cool. All right, so here's how it happens. Bishop b5. Here's another funny thing. Black believes him and plays bishop b7. And I will say this is an interesting psychological thing, because I know that I have done this as well, is that something in your mind will say, okay, he's got to move the knight on b3. But then when he doesn't move the knight, you say to yourself, well, I guess he doesn't have to move the knight. And because you, at some level, you trust your opponent that he's not simply going to blunder the piece like that. Amazing, right? It happens to everybody, though. There's other weird questions, too, like, can't Black play queen b4? You know, to pin the fork the pieces there, too, even if he doesn't see that he can play a, b. Anyways, bishop b7. Now, let me say some obvious things. White is still totally in control, and the main thing to observe is that his king is better than the black king. Like we saw with Marty's game against Elliott, in the late middle game, after some pieces come off and we're dealing with the heavies, the exposed king is really going to be a problem. And it's weird because a lot of times you think, well, you want to not trade pieces off, but it's almost like when we get to the heavy endgame, oh, it's really a bummer, right? And I think we're going to see that here. Vishnu writes, the knight remains here for the rest of the game, so knight f6, keeping it in play, was better. I have sympathy for knight f8. There's the saying that with a knight on f8, you'll never get mated. And if I was black here, I would certainly be worried about getting mated. And the knight on f6 can get hit from a variety of ways, where the knight on f8 at least can't get, traded off as the lone defender. Yeah, no, I have sympathy. I have sympathy for knight f8. Yeah. Vishnu writes he was playing blitz here. I think we're going to be playing blitz probably until the next 11 moves, so it gets to move 40. And that's very common, obviously, for everybody, even the top players in this kind of late middle game. So queen g3, good move. Now, the funny thing about this pawn is it's obviously frightening, but he kind of needs to trade off one rook in order for us to get dangerous. And notice how beautiful... Actually, I thought we were going to play bishop... Let's just say that at any point, white can play bishop d3, and that'll be nice to guard this square. But Vishnu has a much simpler way to deal with this. He says, no, your pawn is lost. And maybe black, honestly, unfortunately for the guy, if he could, maybe he should just throw it away. But unfortunately, the queen is also on this. If we could just give up the exchange but keep our a2 pawn, it might be worth it. All right, so white is obviously completely winning again. And here white begins to blow it. Let's continue to say that white is winning because of the better king. And this is really just an important thing to think about when you're playing this kind of position. Or you just say to yourself, there's so much pressure on the black king that even if the computer told you that black was okay here, you would say to yourself, no, on a practical level, the guy is totally toast, right? Totally toast. Because it's too hard to defend. If you're interested, a game I covered, I think, with Yermo on chess.com that I really like a lot in this regard is Fabi against Mamedyarov in the last Olympiad. Beautiful game where Fabi has the better king in the late middle game. So that looks better than what happened with bishop e3. Also, bishop e7 looks better, but yeah, rook f8 is the practical move. You not only win the pawn, but you continue to put pressure on the king. Queen d5, knight b3. Knight d7, queen g5. And this is one of the moves, Vishnu, that you should feel bad about, right? There's a variety, and what I mean by this, we all make mistakes. But when we go over our games, there has to be certain moves that we whip ourselves for, and other moves that we're like, okay, the computer found some weird thing, and then I get it. Maybe that's not the move I'm going to understand. But this move you should whip yourself for, because you should feel intuitively that your king is hunting his king, right? And you have so many different ways to play simple chess here. Even moves like h3, if you find nothing else, or knight d2. You'd see where the rook goes and then do it. But yeah, trading the queens is a real problem. Are you still better after trading the queens? Yeah. Maybe even in some weird practical sense you're winning because you can be a genius with attacking the pawns. But the whole business with the king is now going to go away. All right, knight e5. Yeah, and blunder's back. Positional blunder, knight e5. Of course you should trade queens. Now you're winning completely again. Rook g4. And what I want you to see about this position is this. So yes, some pieces got traded off and everything, and maybe black feels good about that, but he shouldn't necessarily really feel great about it, because the onslaught really is just beginning now. There's no let up just because you traded off some pieces. Even if we trade the bishop for the knight, there's no let up. In fact, some players might even play bishop c5 here just to be a jerk and be like, you know what, let's just trade the knight and go, and then we'll start attacking the king brutally. In all seriousness, the rook and queen against that poor king with the weakened pawns, it's really a problem. Okay, let's just say bishop d4 is the natural move here, but h4 was played. Kind of a weird move. Now I'm going to assume here that with 40 we had more time on the clock. It isn't always the case you get more time, but I think actually something in the notes suggests too that there was more time now. Rook c1, simple and strong. Not clear what he's doing. Good move. Check to the miserable king. Rook d1, and I like this a lot. Check this move out. Very simple, queen g4. And what it shows, I think, is that in these positions, of course black wants to be active, right? Of course it feels good because they're not just passively sitting. But black can't do it. He's not the one on the attack. He's not the one with the safe king. Even when we go up, we're going to see that the fact that we have more pawns in front of the king, that's a big deal. And rook h1, very controversial because now your rook is out of play. And our force count is truly like these three beauties against, this sad business over here and this sad pawn. So, king g3, queen f6. And I love Vishnu's note here. The queen returns without her rook. That's absolutely right. Let me say this about this thing that black did. It's an example of something that is kind of a deep thing, honestly. So there was an interview, and Magnus is asked, basically, why is he a genius? It's kind of a silly question. He's a genius for a lot of reasons, but he's kind of had thought about it, and I guess answered it in the way of saying, well, in what way am I better than my opponents? And the answer he gave was that he said that he was better at knowing when to go all in or when to pull back. And what Black is doing in this position is he's going all in, and he's doing himself no favors. He needed to go all the way back. He needed to play moves like guarding this pawn and then playing rook d7, right? To try to, circle the wagons, right? But now going all in, the rook is simply misplaced. So this is a very clear example of what Magnus is saying, but you can imagine that there's far more complicated ways in which the idea that he's expressing, right, can be true. Okay, so queen f6, bishop g5, tries to trade, and we say no. And I'm assuming that we got another time control because Vishnu writes, I took 14 minutes for this move as I had to figure out how to convert this. The key idea was to target f8. All right. Queen g6. Queen d6. I think I like it. Queen f5, rook c8. We are threatening the brutalistic bishop e7. e5, so we stop that. Rook e8, rook e1, and very simple and strong bishop e3. I love how the rook is just shut out now from even coming back. Check to the miserable king, and then unfortunately this is the blunder you cannot return from because the queen is hanging. So, beautiful game, and my hope is that Vishnu continues to develop as a player. He played in this same tournament in the under 2100 section that I did this last weekend, gained some rating points, and maybe we need to hold some kind of celebration when Vishnu breaks 2000. It is a very hard thing when you're a little older, like me, to make progress in chess or in anything, really. Very tough, and you're playing all these young kids today who have like a gazillion in Puzzle Rush, and they might not understand positional stuff that well, but they can definitely be tricky. Definitely be very tricky. So, I really like this game, and wish Vishnu the best, and let's move on to our next game. This is Dor from Israel. And let me go all the way back. So, we're getting a little rainstorm here. You can hear the pitter-patter. It's been huge rains in Baltimore recently. Let's flip the colors because it's going to be from Black's perspective here. We've talked about the Scandinavian a bit on this show, and I think queen d8 is playable. But why wouldn't you put the queen on a5? I don't know. Now, later in his notes, Dor says that he had been watching Bartholomew videos, so there's like some kind of abstract ideas that we're going to see later. That I guess we could call theoretical, or at least planned out by Black. So d4. Knight f6, bishop f4. A strange move to play bishop f4. And now a6. Now I assume this is a move that Bartholomew maybe talked about in one of his videos or something like that. Let me just say, for my taste, the simple thing for Black to do here is to play c6 and say that you're dominating the knight and you're stopping this pawn from moving forward, and then the next move, play your bishop out to one of these squares, depending on what white does, and then play e6. And you have a very simple plan of later putting the rook on the d file. I'm sorry, Vic, I hope you're hearing me fine. We got a great thunderstorm going on. I don't know how long it's going to last. So, all right, a6. I'm not a fan of this e6 move. Like I said, maybe it's some idea of Bartholomew's, but right, why would you block in the bishop? Too abstract? Too abstract for this old guy. Okay. Bishop b4. Actually, let me read to you what he wrote. After a6. Actually, he wrote his notes like kind of all in one, but I broke them up just in the parts I thought they pertained to the game. He wrote, the following game took place in the last round of the tournament, and me and my opponent had 2.5 and a 4 and no real chance to win the tournament, so it was for protocol and standing only. I had the black pieces and I played the Scandinavian defense that I learned from Bartholomew's suggestions. So right, I think this whole setup is something that Bartholomew's like been advocating. And I think like if you're a beginning player, don't do weird things. Don't do weird stuff, because it's hard to then, get your pieces out, and we're going to see that these pieces are problematic. They need to be addressed. Castles and bishop b4. This move isn't bad in itself, but what I want, Dora, I want you to see is that what happens after queen e3 is that what you do now is you trade off your two developed pieces. Okay? And by trading them off, it might feel like you're alleviating some of the pressure, but you've left yourself with these two guys, which are doing nothing, right? So let me show you what happened. Bishop c3, and let me show you first what happened, and I'll read what Dor wrote. Now we have to say white's better. He's better developed. He's got the e5 square, and the bishop on c8 is a problem, right? It's not over yet, but it's getting difficult. Let me read what Dor wrote here with bishop takes c3. I felt like playing for a draw would be fine with the black pieces against a higher rated opponent, so I trade pieces early on. And I just want to say, if you want to play somebody and try to beat or draw them, playing moves that are passive just with the thought that you're trading down, no bueno. That's not the way it's going to happen, right? You're just going to get massaged, as happens in this game. So I really think that, don't just simply trade with the notion that you're going to draw your higher rated opponent. Honestly, if I get some game and somebody gives me the following position, well, that's all I can hope for, right? It doesn't get any better. Castles, bishop d3, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, knight e5. Simple and strong play from black. Queen d5. Now, here's his notes. After knight e5, I played carelessly with queen d5 to develop my bishop behind the queen, just to realize that my queen is getting trapped in every line that I calculated. So I took it back and started to defend desperately. Let's look at how this works, because it was an interesting statement to me. I wasn't really sure if it was true. So king b1, and he goes back. And it seemed to me very surprising. So he doesn't give variations, but let me just see if I can understand. So I assume that was the original intention. And by the way, the simple way of doing things would have been to just play b5 now, right? And you're worse, but you're in the game. You're going to play bishop b7 next, and knight c6 is met by queen d6. Probably the fear of knight c6 stopped black from playing b5 in the first place. But let's just say something obvious. Black has to be very concerned that this bishop isn't playing. So queen d5, king b1, queen d5. And like I said, I guess the fear was, let's try to understand what the fear was that bishop e2, I'm guessing, the fear was this thing. And it is scary. However, let me suggest to you that the position you get in the game is worse than whatever your fears were here. I don't know exactly if this works, but my thought would be for black anyway to go ahead and do it, play knight e4, and then next move to play f5. Is it scary? Yes, it is. But your pieces are all active here. And you might have your own counter shots against the white king. So maybe I'm missing something, but that would be my initial hope after you got this position. And clearly after king b1, you were right to be worried. I think it was about this, bishop e2, f3 after b5. But remember, when you do something passive and you lose so much time, it's an example of what Nimzowitsch calls the threat being greater than the execution, right? Because you end up doing your opponent a great favor that it's like the threat in your mind that was created with this bishop e2 thought wasn't even as strong as what you're giving him now. Maybe bishop d7 was the intention. It blocks the queen's way back. You could play bishop d7 too. Yeah, I like bishop d7 better as well. The queen, by the way, has this nice square. We can always go to d6. We're okay there. All right, so let's look at how this goes. c4. By the way, white's next move is to play g4. And I like it a lot. And I assume that his concern with playing c4 was that he wants to stop the knight from coming to d5, just in general. But this isn't a good moment to talk about some of the hopes and dreams of the Scandinavian, at least as I understand them. This pawn is a real question mark. White has really two ways of going about this. At some point he can play c3 to protect the thing, or he can play c4. The second he plays c4, things get a lot more frightening, let's call it that, because then the pawn on d4 is essentially a lot like an isolated pawn. It can't be protected anymore. And the general plan of the Scandinavian, usually I think, let's just say usually, you get your bishop out and you play c6 and you say, you shall not pass, i.e. this pawn will never come forward. And that's the structure Nimzowitsch calls the incinerator. And so the idea is you hold the thing fast, you don't let him come forward, and then you build up your forces against the d4 pawn. And even if you don't necessarily win it right away, white has to pay attention to it. It's your source of counterplay. And especially in a lot of variations, if you can trade off some pieces and line it up on that d-file, it's a problem. So anyways, long story short, if I was white, I think I would say, you know what, I want to play g4 anyway. I want to kick this defender away from the king, and I'm going to say to myself, knight d5, maybe I want to stop it. But on the other hand, black should also be thinking about knight d7 to get rid of the knight on e5 as well, right? Okay, so c4, bishop d7. I'm not thrilled about it, and a move that should come to mind is to say, you know what, this is opposite sides castling, and we need to get a little crazy with b5. Is it dangerous? Yeah, it's dangerous, but we're not going to get mated nearly as quickly as we are if we just kind of sit around and make moves like bishop d7. The bishop doesn't have much of anywhere to go from d7, and it's in the way of the queen. g4, very nice move. b5 now. So notice, so this is a good point. I'm sure when you played bishop d7 that you wanted to protect this pawn, right? But bear in mind, when there is castling on opposite sides, the value of the initiative goes dramatically up. And so what I mean by that is pawns always have value, but in this position, I think we are more than happy to give up a pawn because we're the ones now with the juice on the white king. And now look at that. Now our bishop's a champion, right? So, yeah, I think b5 immediately. Very important thing to remember. I'll say it again. The value of pawns is always important, but with opposite sides castling, the value of the initiative goes up and the value of pawns goes down. It's because whoever gets to the king first All of white's forces are going to have to start moving backwards towards the white king if we on the black side get the initiative. And the attack is not going to end anytime soon. And the same thing goes for white. If he gets it going fast enough, as we're going to see in this game, it's going to be really hard to move. Okay, bishop d7, g4. The other bummer about bishop d7 was that it blocked our natural retreat for our knight, which needed to get rid of this guy. c5, very nice. Bishop e4, very nice. So that series of moves, white played very nicely. The bishop on e8 is continuing to be toast. And here, let's just pause for a second and say that white is strategically winning. Because he's got the better king, and he has the far better center control of the center, and the black minors are both atrocious. What he should, however, really be laser focused on is simply the question of not how do I mate him, but how will black ever move again? And I think if you say to yourself, oh right, well the only way for him to ever move again is playing f6, then you do something to address it, right? And the simple thing that I thought immediately of for white here is just play here and say, okay, you can play f6, buddy, but it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. So, for example, f6 takes. You can't take with the queen because of queen h5. And on knight f6, we're just going to now put this bishop back. And I think it's all over. It's going to be mate soon. And the minors continue to be poor. So, bishop f3, instructive mistake. We don't really want that knight. f6, very good move. And now I'm going to imagine that white has something better than what he did. I'm going to say probably maybe something like pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Now I really like this next development. It's kind of fun and interesting. Snip, snip. The position's totally changed. And in fact, now I like black better. Amazingly, right? And let's talk about why. Our rook is improved. These pawns are weak. And now white cannot prevent the bishop from returning to c6. And so what we can imagine happened here is this is an amazing turnaround game, is that in this position where white is clearly better, winning, I'm going to say winning, he goes pawn grabbing in this position. It's a very instructive mistake. And it happens so fast, right? All of a sudden, he can't go back to f3. The guy can't go back. And so now, very simple play from black. Bishop d5, sure. Rook c1. Queen f7, sure. Simple chess. And it's over. Totally over. Rickert, who is we're gonna cover his game in a touch. He wrote in and asked, why did white resign? Because it's over. King a2, queen c1. Or I guess you could try running with the king. And I think there's going to be grief with that as well, with, let's say, queen c4. You cannot play queen c3 because of queen g4. And if you run with the king, we're going to check you and separate your rook from your man. Okay. One thing about what Dor's experienced just in the chess world that I find really interesting is from the notes that he wrote in, I gleaned that he hasn't really played tournaments, and this was a tournament game that he played because he felt like his chess had been at a standstill, and that someone had told him that playing tournament chess would be a good way for him to improve. And you know, an old guy like me, it's really astounding, of course, because for me, playing chess over the board was everything. It kind of still is. The blitz is just the fun thing you might do now and then. But what Dor is, essentially an example of is that now we have a number of players who are becoming strong simply by doing blitz, maybe slightly longer games like 10-minute games, and playing Puzzle Rush, right? And it really is a beautiful thing because it costs money to go to a tournament, it costs time, and not everybody has it. So it's amazing to me that Dor has reached this level that he's at, and is ready now maybe to play some tournaments. Let me read to you his final question. Do you think that the time control is too long for an amateur player like me? The time control, I think, was the standard 90 and 30. No, I don't think it's too long for anybody. I think playing a long time control is great for anybody who wants to improve. You need some time to feel your way into the position and really deepen your understanding of the game. Playing blitz chess is great to some extent, but you're not going to develop strategic concepts that you can, even if you're playing blitz chess, when you see very strong GMs play blitz chess, they're still using the ideas that they learned by playing slow chess in the blitz games. And he writes, do you think I'll gain more from quicker games, 15 plus 10, for example, in terms of improvement? No, but like I said, I think you're doing an interesting thing. You are, a part of a new generation who is playing online mostly, and obviously you're doing something right, because you're making progress. Okay. Nutra, who are you? Who are you? How did you see me over there? I'm a noob. What does King B7 do? I might have King B1. King B1. We can go back. Let's go back to that. King B1 is a pretty standard move. Let's go back. So in this position, the A2 pawn is threatened, and it's true that white could, play maybe something like this, but King B1 is absolutely correct. Not only to protect the pawn, but a way to think about queenside castling is when you do it, you in general owe black a move to play King B1, because not only is the A pawn in danger, but you will at some point become hit on this diagonal as well. So yes, King B1 is a very common move. You see it a lot in Sicilians and other opposite sides castling positions. Okay, so let's move to the next game. This is Nicholas. He's been on the show many times before. This is game 90 plus 30 seconds to move. A lot of. This is a kind of a new time control. It means that everybody is kind of, playing quicker in the end game. Knight F6, great opening variation. And let's talk. Actually, you know what? I'm going to apologize a little bit. I should have put this game earlier when I was talking about Fischer and the King's Indian attack. If you're just joining me now, there's the video, I guess, will be posted on my Twitch page or whatever, and you can go back and look at it. But the idea of Queen E2 is really to get an advanced version of that Knight D2 position. It obviously looks weird, but the idea is very simple, and that is you still want to play G3 and Bishop G2 and Knight F3. So it's not like your queen is really blocking the bishop. And you'll still play things like D3, but you have more flexibility. You might play Knight C3, and there's some great variations really where later, much later, you imagine all that stuff happening that we talked about with the pawns coming up and Bishop A4. A lot of times there's this interesting thing that can happen where white plays C4 to block him, to just block black totally off from his queenside attack, and that's one of the ideas of Queen E2. And the other simple thing, though it's a funny thing, is I think one of the intentions was to say, well, if black plays D5, then we'll take it. Now, the funny thing about this is I'm not sure this is that big of a deal for black. It's fine for black because the queen is still funny on e2, and we're kind of getting, actually, let's call it a John Bartholomew Scandinavian, where we've blocked the bishop and maybe we'll do something maddening like ba6, b5 later. But anyways, my point is that's totally playable for black. And one thing white might even want to consider is just the very simple d3 to continue playing the structure. It doesn't really change much. And white has a similar question after knight f6, how to play the position. I played this move as black, U.S. Championship, like 2006, I think, in San Diego. And for me, the point was that I wasn't afraid of e5, and we'll talk about that because that happens in the game. But then on d3, I can play d5, and we're just going to get a position where, let's say, knight f3, I have more flexibility now to do all kinds of positions. The one I like, though, is just to play knight c6, g3, snip, snip, e5, and maybe bishop g4 later. Anyways, let's think about e5. What we have now with e5 is a better version of the Alekhines defense. Better because the queen is arguable, controversial on e2. Now, like in the Alekhine, black has two choices. He can play the very strange knight g8, that is a move in the Alekhine, or he can play knight d5, which is, let's say, more sane. Now, Nicholas gets a kick out of the fact that knight g8 was played by Vaganian, one of the most creative players, Armenian guy. I had the honor of playing Vaganian way back in the day in the Bundesliga. But knight d5, I think, is definitely, you've got a nice game here. You're going to do things like d6, and depending on what he does, basically, if you're just going to play bishop e7 and castles, and the queen, you're going to say that the queen on e2 is really funny. And you're not really worried about c4. c4 is not that big of a deal. Okay, but here we go. Knight g8 was in fact played. b6. Interesting move. So you had a number of different things you could do. You could get a French-like position with d5. You could prevent him from playing d4 with c5. b6 strikes me as a little funny, but I don't think it's bad. And one cool idea that you do here is after queen e4, you play f5. Good. And actually, let me share something with Marty. Let's look at Marty's position. There's a similar idea in this variation we were talking about earlier. This position where it can go d4 takes, queen takes, e6, knight f3, knight c6, queen e4, f5. And black has good play. I think queen d4 is a mistake from white. This is a line that I played against, I think, several times when I was a kid, and it was kind of popular back in the day. The main reason, not so much being that the queen is misplaced, but when you play c3, your knight is really pissed off. Your knight's really pissed off and wants the pawn to move. Okay, let's go back to Nicholas here. So f5, queen e3. Can you give tips on how to beat lower-rated players around 2100 strength? Yeah, I wish it were. It was honestly very hard for me this last tournament. I had a hard time. Geez, these kids now are really, really tough. But let me say this, that what we got from Marty's game, where he was playing someone higher rated, was that if you take them to an endgame if you take the lower rated, the 2100s to an endgame, if you have confidence in your own endgame skills, that is the place where you can put your knife through butter, as it were, instead of having to put your knife through granite. Okay. Bishop b7, very interesting position. Pretty novel in a lot of ways. Bishop e2. Look at that. A madman. A madman. Did he have to castle long? I think it's a little weird. Let's say that a simpler way to go about this would be to just play knight h6, f7, and then see what white does. Your king doesn't have to commit so soon. Let me put it that way, right? Queen e7. c3. He's going to come for you now. Boom. And now we got an interesting game. Yeah. Knight h6. And it's obviously frightening. Queen e8. a5. Very upfront about what he's doing, right? g5. Great move. Bishop c1. Obviously, this is not the happiest thing here for white to be doing this. And he should be thinking, before he goes back like that, he should be thinking, I guess, about b5, right? And you don't have to do it right away, but we really don't want to go back like this. Good move. Good move. We talked a lot actually about the pawns pointing, and it's kind of a funny thing here where black is going to have the initiative on the side where it's a little bit funny, right? Because normally, the things are shifting around. Now, what do I think about this position? I think it's still very dangerous for black, but white's next plan I don't like. He plays f4, and this is just going to help black open things up. Let's just say that the natural plan here would be to play knight b3 to intend b5. And in fact, you didn't need to play bishop c1 to do this. You can play knight b3 and then b5, and obviously you're working against this knight coming to a5, keeping the rook open with, a nice initiative. So f4 mistake, snip, and pawn takes is kind of weird, isn't it? Right? Why wouldn't you take with a piece, let's say the bishop? Because now, oh man, black is going to seize the initiative. And remember what I was saying about players knowing when to go all in and when to pull back? The last several moves are an example of it. So you imagine black has seized the initiative now. And instead of trying to fix his pieces, which he desperately needs to do, white is making a claim with queen f1 that no, he can mate black with just 3 pieces. And this might be scary. I'm sure it's a little scary for black. But on the other hand, he should say to himself, oh no, I believe in this, right? Snip, nice move. Snip. And another bold and simple move, and that we should definitely believe in the black position here. Right? Look at this thing. White has no development, and his king is more open than ours actually is. Bishop a3. Now, ed4 felt to me like a bit much. I didn't understand, for example, why wouldn't we just play rook a8? There might be more violent things, but rook a8 just kind of screams to be played to reduce any thought of counterplay. Snip, knight c4, and now black starts worrying about knight b6. And I think maybe it's computer notes, but he says, hey, I should have played e5 here, so that when this goes down and check happens, I can escape this way. And that's probably true, but it's getting a little more hairy than we wanted it to be, I think. Okay. And rook b8, of course, is sad because we're passive here. White's attack, though, is really problematic now because he doesn't have any pieces, and his queen, he's effectively locked his queen out of play. This is all over now. Queen g6, very nice move. It wasn't a comment on this, but it's just a simple, let's call it a puzzle rush move, because we're saying you can't take the knight because we are going to mate you. I'm sure queen g4 is a move. Pretty sure rook g8 is also a move with the slice and dice. Before we had Puzzle Rush, I really advocated, I guess I still do, this Polgar book with the gazillion problems. It's not one of the, it's the Polgar father wrote the book, and to me I had all kinds of funny names for these patterns, and to me this is the slice and dice, and you get the queen on g2 and the slice here with the bishop. Okay, so knight c3, rook g8, simple and strong, king e2, check to the miserable king, check to the miserable king, mate. Also kind of a different kind of slice and dice. So very nice game. Nicholas has sent some games in before. Great stuff. Yeah, beautiful game. You know what? He posted actually also the Vaganian game. Let's just flow through that a little bit because Vaganian was such a genius. And I'm going to guess that this B6 plan that he adopted was kind of inspired by it, right? There's more than one move that black could play here, obviously, right? But okay, B6. Nice. Black is playing for mate. Our pieces are better. Oh, yeah. Someone asked about king b1 earlier. White would certainly wish that he had king b1 here. Check to the miserable king. Check to the miserable king. I don't know. Something happened wrong? What happened here? Oh, it turned into a real mess. I can't tell you what's going on. I think we're going to dealing with some time pressure with the geniuses here. I think black had something better in there. Anyways, let's move on to Tim. All right. Let me start from the start. E4. And he writes that he was surprised by this move, and he said everyone plays the following against me. Knight e5. They do. This is all the rage, and it's been so for a while. I have a friend who plays the Petrov, or used to play the Petrov, and he can't deal with it to get this position. I think Petrov players should rejoice in this. You have a variety of plans available to you here, and you're basically fine. Fabi's played some great games, but I will mention actually just a classic game that everybody should look at. It's a beautiful game that Fabi lost in this variation, not necessarily because of the opening, but it's Karyakin against Fabi from the candidates matches. It was a game he lost, even though he won that tournament to qualify to play Magnus. Anyways, that's a different story. So, surprised by this move, let's flip the board. And we get this Scotch. And let's just say black is doing great. Let's say it's equal, but still black has every reason to be happy about this position. The bummer for white is that d5 is coming, and if it would be possible to not have to take this pawn, then it wouldn't be so bad for white. But since, let's say, bishop d3, black can play d5, and black, Tim waits in this game to play d5. I don't think there's any rush, but you can definitely play d5 now. And there's the simple problem that if white takes, he fixes these pawns, and this guy can come up to c6 to hold everything together with some nice central control. And if he has to take, then the pressure... Well, right, he would, if he could keep this pawn, let me put it this way, if he could keep this pawn sitting on e4, keep the tension, then things would work out. Unfortunately, though, it's the pressure on the e4 pawn that's the deciding thing, which is saying to white, you must decide what you're going to do there. And I don't think e5 is any good. I think both knight d7 and knight g4 look problematic, because these guys are going to roll. Now, I think it's possible for you to castle, but I think in the future, just play d5 immediately, because this is the thing you're aiming for here. And Carlsen played this as white a couple times, and I think he basically just acknowledged here that this was equal. But, saying it's like an interesting position. Notice that you're killing the knight when you play c6. In fact, I talk a lot about how this pawn dominates the knight on c3. But when you have this one, too, it's added grief, because now he doesn't get the e4 square either. So we're working against this knight. And, right, we could play castle short before we play c6. I'm just saying you can play c6 here. And that's kind of the idea that you're striving for in this position. Now, Tim asked me kind of an abstract question that I want to get to here. I hope I didn't lose this here. But basically, actually, let me just paraphrase the question. It was about bishops and knights, and actually, I know when, excuse me. It's going to be a little bit later. So he asked me about bishops and knights and when to trade, and we're going to get to it. But the thing I want you to see about this position is it really is all about the fact that d5 forces white to make a decision with the e4 pawn. And let's get into it. So castles, I think, is still fine, because you can still play d5. And I think you need to do it right now. But rook e8, I don't think actually throws anything away. Queen f3. Maybe rook e1 there, but let's say queen f3. d5, good move. And now bishop b4. So he talks about bishop c3. But he says in this game, which I guess was the second time he had this kind of position, he was traumatized by the power of the bishops. Therefore, I played this. After the game, I checked with the engine, and it said that bishop takes c3 was better than bishop e7. Due to this, I wonder if you could have a show about bishop against knight positions, both interesting positions like the Rossolimo Sicilian, and lopsided positions where the bishops outplay the knights and where the knights outplay the bishops. And then he gives some examples. So we can get a better understanding of when to trade bishop for knight and when to not. Okay. I would love to do that. And one of the things I said that I liked, I don't always say things I like, but I had a show with Malik Kashian, and we were just talking about chess in general. And one thing I noted is that now one of the big trends in opening theory is to accept a pawn weakness in return for the two bishops. Like the Rossolimo and like the Berlin. Those are the two most obvious ones to come to mind, but there's others. And that would be a delight to talk about. But what I want us to see here is that the reason bishop c3 is absolutely essential is that we have to force the guy to make a call about the e4 pawn. Right? Yeah, that guy needs to make a call. So bishop takes c3 is therefore pretty good, and I think you might even be able to get away with h6 to say, no, you can't be doing this. The complications here, though, show that d5 earlier would have been more prudent, both instead of castling and then instead of rook e8. So, right, let's just take a look. Bishop c3. And again, if you're going to be scared of the bishops, it's this bishop that you need to be afraid of. And we get a free developing move. And it's a little rough for the guy, right? If he goes to e3, there's problems over here. And, you know, if he takes, he obviously gives away his bishop. He could also play, I think, something like this. Bishop f6, bishop f3, bishop d8, and then I assume something like this, and we're doing fine, right? So what I want you to see is that, yes, you were traumatized by the bishop pair, and that led you to do this move, which I don't think actually has ruined anything yet. It's the next move that puts you in real trouble. Let's just say it's unsatisfying, of course, to put the bishop in front of the rook, right? I still think you're okay in this position, though. But, of course, it's a little unsatisfying, like I said, to play bishop e7. The guy takes, okay? And now this is the move that I really don't like. Knight takes d5. As you know, on this show, several times I have said that pawns aren't people. And that's generally the case. Pawns are not people. But I want you to see that the pawns now on c6 and c7 don't dominate the white pieces. And so the way I'm going to put it to you is that it's now white's pieces who are really going to benefit. In particular, the knight is so happy now that this d5 pawn isn't dominating him anymore. And right, this whole thing is going on. So the question I had to ask is, could you have played cd? Right? And I'm assuming that the reason you didn't was because you were worried about, and rightfully so, because it is a little scary, you were worried about bishop f6. And by the way, if he does not take you, what are you going to do? You're just going to play c6, and you're going to have complete domination of that stupid knight. And he's never going to mate you or do terrible things to you without that knight. Right? So c6 is a real positional threat. So bishop f6. Bishop f6. By the way, you're the one now with the bishops. I'm just saying this is probably what you were afraid of. Knight d5, and it's scary because this guy's loose, right? But bishop b2. And I think the tactical point to see is that if rook b1, you don't have to move the bishop. You can, in fact, move your rook. And I think you're fine. I think you're fine here. You know, if you're a friend of the bishops, you'll believe you're even better. Maybe white can do something fancy with knight c7, but honestly, it's a little highfalutin for my taste. You know, like, I don't know what's going on. Like, let's say you win a pawn or something. No, I don't know if you really want to do this. You're down a pawn, but these bishops are very strong. Yeah, I don't know about the knight c7 moves. So, right, one thing I'll preach is that in this position, you can say to yourself, right, I'm afraid that if I play cd, all kinds of terrible tactical things are going to happen to me. And you're right to be afraid of that. But when you have a positional move like cd that really wants to be played, remember, we're trying to dominate the center and that knight. That's the move you should really force yourself to make work, to make sure it's like actually, possible to do. All right. Sometimes they become animals in the back rank. Yes, the pawns do. So instead, black played knight d5, and now he's in positional trouble. And he writes, let's read what he writes. When thinking for 27 minutes, I only calculated lines where I captured with the pawn. Even if this is a good move, the crime really is the act of playing a move that I've barely looked at instead of playing a move I calculated thoroughly. Okay, bishop e7, rook e7, rook a d1. And let me say here that you are definitely worse, but that you aren't lost yet. The problem is that the knight on c3 is now going to become a monster with a move like this. Now, what do you need to do? You have to play, I think, something like bishop e6. You just have to do it. And you are worse, and things like knight e4, and then the whole drama is going to come down on you, but it's not over yet. After bishop b7, I want you to pay attention. This is a crime, because the bishop is really out of the game, and you've lost control of all of these important squares. And now some simple things happen. Bishop e4, rook d7, check to the miserable rook, good move. Knight e4, and now we're lost, right? Bishop a6, knight f7. And yeah, we're toast. Okay, Tim, good game. And I hope that helps you, because you will see that again. It's a very common thing. In fact, if I was playing white, I might even say to myself, you know what, I don't want any theory, and I don't want to play what everyone does. I just want to get, some position, or maybe my opponent doesn't know it too well, right? Such as this, and we'll just play from there. And I'll look at the Magnus game and try to copy a little bit of what he did, right? Okay, let's move on. All right, this is Andrew. Andrew was at the tournament I played in Denver end of April. So let's look. d4, c6. It always freaks me out when someone plays c6 first. Why wouldn't you play d5 first? I guess you're hoping for a caro as well, I guess. c5, bad move. And this will be important to understand. It's bad for several reasons. The first is simply time. Now black has more time. The other reason that maybe is not immediately evident is that you are losing your pressure on the center. And that actually allows black immediately to do something violent like that, where he's definitely better. I guess white would have to play, I don't know, e3 or something. And we've got a weak pawn. Black has a choice of playing against the weak pawn, or at some point pushing the thing with a very, let's call it a good advanced French. Okay, so c5. I should say there are some times when it's possible to play c5. Let me maybe point one out. Knight c3, knight f3, knight f6, excuse me, knight f3, a6, the so-called Chebanenko. Now c5 makes more sense, because black is giving you this tempo, and he's giving you this square, and by giving you the square, it's not so much that you want to like sink a knight in there, but it makes this counterplay harder. And notice also that white in this position is aiming to say there's no e5. Gelfand's played some very interesting games in this position, generally with some kind of violent knight e5 and f4 Philidor thing. And I think I talked about that kind of plan ages ago on this show. I called it the Philidor just now, but I don't mean that. I mean the other guy. Do we call that the Marshall? I think we call it the Marshall. I hope so. God, I'm losing my mind. I'm getting older and I'm losing my mind. Okay, so c5, e5 for sure. We get this position. And because white has stopped e5, it's not so bad. But black should definitely consider b6 here. For example, b6, you're also opening the bishop, but you're really going to try to crack white open with something like this. I'd rather be black still. So queen c2, snip. Queen c2 is an ambitious move. Knight h5. I guess knight d7 is also possible. And here you took, or you played a5. Yeah, this didn't make any sense to me. So say to yourself, this guy wants freedom, right? And so the natural thing to do here is to play for e5. And there's a couple ways you could do it. The simplest is just go bam, bam, and play e5. You could also wait a move. That might be more cunning and say, well, if you play f4, you killed your bishop, and I can live with that, right? a5, the controversy is, I don't know what you're doing over there, right? Bishop d3, knight d7, so it's like a full loss of a tempo. And I think I like this position for black, but it is frightening. And let's say a couple words about what's going on here. A theme I addressed earlier, I'm going to horrifically blow my nose on air here. A theme I addressed earlier was the idea that the value of the initiative goes up when we have opposite sides castling. When I say up, just in relation to, say, a pawn. You should be more willing to give up a pawn for an initiative when there's opposite side castling. It's also true that the value of the initiative goes up with opposite color bishops, and we did briefly touch on that, I think, in our game with Paul in New Jersey. And so this remarkable position has both aspects are true of that. White played rook h2, and I'm not sure about it. Now, one reason we should believe, I think, in the black position is that this bishop is a great defender, and the white of the dark square. So imagine even if the rook penetrates, it's not mate yet because we're covering the square. And it's working really well with the light squares where this bishop is blunted. So that's White's, I think, fundamental problem that he's facing. That said, I don't think you should open the thing up on d4, right? I think much more sound, instead of White played rook h2, it seems to me like you need to defend the dude over there. And then you can maybe think about doubling later. Anyways, rook h2, snip, snip, and White poses an interesting question. Do you want to take on d4? And I think you do. It's a little scary, no doubt. But the reason is that you would be activating your knight by later winning this pawn. Again, you're not into doing it for the pawn. You're doing it to get the initiative. I don't know about this, actually. I take it all back. We can take that pawn later, actually. Let's just take here, and then we'll come back. This might be insane, actually, what I'm doing. Might be too dangerous. No, I think it's okay. You could do this. Your knight, like we said earlier, your knight on f8, you're not going to get mated. Is it scary? Yes. All right. Notice that a5 really that was a full loss of time. b6. Okay, it's going to be fun. Actually, I like b6. Rook h1, knight f6. Now, an interesting thought would have been, could we get away with bc? Because the rook on h7 is not mate yet. And when you play knight f6, your knight isn't actually doing anything, and it's in the way of the bishop. So let's consider it briefly. Pawn takes. Inviting this rook to the party. Let's say queen f6. Yeah. Actually, we were talking in our last game, and what's very true here still is that these two pawns are completely dominating this knight. And we are really aiming for that square. And there's a party happening here for black. And you can see it's very hard for this piece to get involved into the attack, for this guy and for this guy. And anybody who fianchettos the bishop should know this pattern where it's like, oh, I'm not, there's no mate. A lot of times too, you can even, if your rook is here, you can even invite the queen down here and you say, oh, no mate. And that's an example of the bishops of opposite color, where if you're trying to attack me on the dark squares, which is really what white wants, right? He's either going for this square or he's going for this square. He has no chance on the dark squares. It's only the light squares that he can crack me. Okay, so knight f6, g4. I don't understand why people aren't taking on, well, I guess I do. Queen c7, knight e2, oh man, snip, snip. Rook e8, I'm not sure about rook e8. This rook b8 is calling out to me. It's just calling out to me. Because if he plays g5, then we can do this, and I'm not worried about the exchange sack, because boom. In general, I'm going to say the exchange sack doesn't bother me too much. In fact, let's just put it this way. So like we said, we can have the king going to f8. Actually, let's make a point of that. Rook b8, dangerous, because g5, knight h5, rook h5, and if gh, I don't want my king to have to go that way. Now, we might even still be able to do this and claim that we're winning, and I actually kind of think we are. But that's more complicated than we needed to make it, right? Whereas rook e8, probably okay, but it makes me worried. King b1, like we said earlier, always a useful move, but unfortunately now it's just a tempo loss, because rook b8 is, it's like king b1 is screaming for rook b8 to be played. Knight c1, thank you very much, and it's all over. It's going to be mate. Okay, beautiful game, Andrew. Gonique Chess is rating me. All right. I haven't understood the rating of things yet, but I think it's cool when someone rates me. All right, we got one more game to cover. This is the famous Ricker. Ricker's been on the show several times. And, you know, one thing is, people of a variety of levels, you know, submit their games here. And Ricker is a little older like me and, you know, struggling to improve. And it's hard. It's hard. And I think the thing that plagues Ricker and a lot of players that I've seen who are older at his level is just the ability to not drop stuff, right? And it's hard. It's hard to get over that. I think one nice thing is back in the day we didn't have Puzzle Rush, but I think Puzzle Rush will at least get your mind focused in such a way that you won't be dropping pieces as much. Okay, a similar question to what Dor had about what kind of time control he should be aiming for. And I definitely think longer games. I suspect, though, that what Ricker's doing is he is playing mostly online. And something I've seen people doing online, which I haven't really tried yet, but makes a lot of sense to me, is there's these games which last longer, like a couple days. And I forget already, but one of the players earlier was playing with one of those long games. Actually, I think it was Paul who had one of the longer games. That's right. So that's available to people as well. And I would definitely say that Blitz is mostly for fun and maybe practicing your openings a little bit. But for real chess, Greg Shahada would hate me if I say this, but it's true. For real chess, it's, you know, you need some time to think about stuff. And generally, it's hard to think in front of a computer because there's so much distractions just waiting for you at any moment. Yeah, so that's my advice. I also want to just advocate that, you know, most of us are playing chess for some deeper reason that if you want to be fancy, you can call spiritual, right? There's some kind of experience of depth that we find in chess, and it's a beautiful thing. And by playing a longer game, it's like you're honoring that intuition that brought you to chess in the first place. Okay, let's take a look at this game. Look at these moves. What's going on? Give me it all. Ricker's white here. Okay, here we go. H5. No, you can't play chess like this. Now, Ricker, you're doing great, but do you recall that when we were looking at Marty's game, and he was playing the IM, H5 was also played in that game, and Marty also played H4. There's no need for H4. That guy's not doing anything over there. He's just wasting time. Bring out your dudes. Bring out your guys. That's what they're there for. Simple thing to remember. Nimzovich said it. And the attack on the wing is met by action in the center. And that certainly applies to this position. Now, what is wrong with this? The problem is that Black is completely underdeveloped and he's opening the position, which is in general a bad idea. So E5, I advise against. You're doing so great that you should think about ripping everything open with a simple move like DC. ED is also playable. You're doing fine. And bring out your dudes, put the rook over here, bring out this bishop somewhere, and you will mate him because his king is now no permanent safety zone. So even though you're doing still great after E5, you're not advancing on his main weakness, which is his king. And you're playing it like a French now, right? Terrible move, F6, right? In the French, we generally don't like to move on our weaker side. We're talking about this, right? The pawns are pointing this way, so that means white is stronger over there. This move is a move on our weaker side, and it's an example of how it's a problem to make moves like that. Because now when Black plays his freeing move, well, there's an obvious problem. And so his king went from a little safer than it was before he opened the position to now just completely open. Good move. Very simple chess. You're totally winning. Beautiful. 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 Very simple, beautiful chess here. There's no stress, and we're mating the guy. Oh, man. So, Ricker, I want to say, I feel like with this game, you are improving, no doubt. You didn't make any big mistakes, and when it came time to mate the guy, yeah, you're mating the guy, right? Mate. Very nice. Yeah. So I feel like that was very nice game, and when you're playing this kind of level where they're not developing, I thought you did a good job. And, you know, maybe the one move to think about was that E5 move. And a way to think about it is if you have a household and you're fighting, you're fighting with your wife, your kids are unhappy with who you are, you know, there's stuff strewn all over the place, there's grime on the kitchen table. That's not in general when you want to invite people to your house. Not just because it's embarrassing, but it's just more stress to have people in the house. But see, when your opponent has not taken care of his business, it's especially bad when he opens up the position, as he does with then D5 and C5, right? He's opening up all the doors and the windows to the house for everybody to come in. And that's when you say to yourself, okay, I don't know exactly how this is going to shake out because I'm not a chess genius, myself included. I wouldn't know exactly what's happening. I would just know that it's time to open everything. All right, the Goldsmith defense. I didn't even know that it was called the Goldsmith defense. Is that what they call it here too? But the guy, did he play he played A5 on move. And that doesn't even get a name. Chess.com has names for all these openings that I didn't even know had names. But they don't have one for A5. So somebody needs to come up with a name for that. Okay, guys, beautiful show. Beautiful games. I will get the thread up for next month soon, so you can start posting. And next week, I guess I have to start talking about my own losses. So, right, Wednesday is the hour show. It's just the last Wednesday of every month is this 3-hour show where we talk about games. So next week I'll move on. Usually I'm talking about mine, but honestly, if you have a suggestion for me, you can write me on chess.com or Twitter, and I will try to, talk about it if I feel I can talk about it in any kind of meaningful way. Whatever it is you're interested in. And yeah, that show is at 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific next Wednesday. So hope to see you guys there. Take it easy. Thank you for being on the show. Bye.